Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats where we do live videos to help parents get information they need to keep their kids learning during the pandemic, if it's at-home learning, if it's getting safely back on campus, or enrichment activities like learning that they can do from home. And that's what we're focusing on today. And our special guest today, I'm very grateful, he's very busy these days, is Nammie Ichilov, and he's the CEO of the Jewish Federation of San Antonio, and he's also the director of the Holocaust Museum of San Antonio. And thank you so much for joining me on Charter Moms Chats.
Thank you for having me, Inga.
So the reason why I've spoken with Nammie before, actually he's a repeat guest on Charter Moms Chats. His daughter Adina was a graduating senior in the class of 2020, and she spoke about that experience, and it was a very different year for seniors in 2020, that's for sure. So I'm really glad to have you back. But the reason today is very different. It's because next week is Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, and so, that's the reason why we're focusing on this, is we wanted to give families resources so that they can be prepared and they can, observe what their schools are teaching their children, either on campus or distance learning, or they can supplement at home. So, but I was hoping you could tell us more about your role at the Holocaust Museum of San Antonio, and like how it got started and what you're hoping to accomplish there.
Sure, thank you. So dealing with Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week specifically, this year we're going to be celebrating our second annual Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week. It's actually, not every state has a Holocaust Remembrance Week, and so Texas is actually leading the way in having a curriculum mandated requirement for all children in kindergarten through 12th grade. And it came about actually because of four local heroines. These four ladies, they're lovingly called Four Ladies in a Car. Their names are Lisa Barry, who's actually an Alamo ISD teacher, Sharon Greenwald, Varda Ratner, and Ginny Wynn, who are all descendants of Holocaust survivors. And the Four Ladies in a Car, actually, they were traveling back and forth to Austin in order to be able to lobby our senators to add a curriculum requirement, and Senator Menendez championed their cause and was able to get it passed in 2019, and now we're celebrating our second annual Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week.
Yeah, it makes me proud that Texas is one of the leaders of that, and I'm really grateful to Senator Menendez for for his leadership in making sure that the bill got passed. Because the Texas legislative session, there's another session just starting right now, and it's just there's just tons of bills, and most of them don't get across the finish line. So it takes it's real leadership to get it done, and now, yeah, like you said, this is the second year of observing Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week. Like you said, it applies to K through 12 schools.
Yeah, and it's this particular week of the calendar because on the 27th of January, it will be the 76th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and that sort of was ultimately the turning point of the liberation, and so the International Holocaust Remembrance Day is January 27th. So the days that bookend that are our Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week.
Right. So the dates might be a little different every year, but it's always going to bracket that International Holocaust Remembrance Day on the 27th, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And for us, this year obviously is a unique year. I think it is for everybody, for our teachers in the classroom, for our students, whether they're at home or in the classroom, and everybody and all parents. And this year, what the museum in particular did was actually change all of its exhibits and online learning platforms into a more robust website. So at the website, we have lots of educator materials, lots of parent resources, even student resources. So that was a lot of the initial days of the pandemic, was us converting all of our live exhibits into virtual exhibits online. And they're certainly being used right now by our educators in town. So that's great.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know how important that is. I miss going to museums. That's one thing that my family loves to do, and it's a great way to teach kids about history, and because there's artifacts and there's like stories that reflect survivors and their experiences, and yeah, I'm a big believer in museums, but these times are different, and we're mostly sheltering at home, so the fact that the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio has put like everything online is really extraordinary. That's a real gift to the community, to be able to keep accessing those resources, even when people are not feeling safe necessarily to go. Because I think the physical space at the museum is not open to the public right now, right? Because of the pandemic.
Correct. We typically in a sort of normal year we would see about 19,000 visitors. The far majority of those visitors are actually class field trips. They're teachers coordinating their trips or administrators coordinating for their students trips to the museum. We actually offer a subsidy for bus costs for those schools who might need that additional subsidy. So we're happy to be able to help that. And then for those teachers who are able to get their students released for slightly longer than a simple visit to the museum, we actually have educational programming that we can provide on site for them too. Additionally, we have the memorial part of the museum, which is an area where visitors can spend some time and reflect on the experience of being in the museum and seeing some of those difficult subject matter and artifacts that the Holocaust education provides.
Yeah, and then and in case folks don't know, the museum physical location is on the campus of the Jewish Community Center. Is that right? It's like on Northwest Military, kind of the northwest side of town.
Right, it's Northwest Military and Wurzbach Parkway. It's right on the corner there, and it's 12,500 Northwest Military Trail. And right now, obviously, we're not having visitors on site, but we are scheduling potentially for the later spring, and certainly for those schools that are looking at the fall of 2021, we're happy to schedule class tours, and we can always make adjustments as necessary. All of that information is available on the website.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so I want to speaking of websites, I want to mention that in the description of the video, there's a link to a guest post that you wrote for us. I'm really grateful for that. And so in the guest post, there's also links to find the museum website, which actually I'll pop that up here right here. But that's the link to find the website. But I encourage everyone to read the blog post, because there's a lot of great resources in there about like how to access what's at the museum, about events that are coming up. And things like that. But actually, if I can sort of pivot to when I asked you to write the guest post, kind of the charge that I gave you was, it's so essential that like every student learn about the Holocaust, right? And that's the objective of Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, is to make sure that schools are covering this and that it's not getting left behind. But it's such a difficult subject to teach that I think teachers and parents are maybe afraid to bring it up, or not sure how to introduce it, not sure how to teach it in an age appropriate way. And then you came back with like sort of surprising, but once I understood it, kind of obvious, like, yes, of course that's the right way to do it. So so how do you teach about the Holocaust in a developmentally appropriate way for children of different ages? How do you make it a constructive conversation and not just something that's just terrifying or almost defies belief?
Yeah, I think that's really the key question, Inga. When the state legislature passed that would be a requirement of kindergarten through 12th grade, I'm sure that there were many educators and parents alike that questioned how on earth are kindergartners going to be required to study the Holocaust, and Holocaust education. And what is really important for parents to understand, as well as educators, which is part of our mandate to help them understand, is that we're not looking to teach the facts, the figures, the unfortunate gory details of the Holocaust. Those require a much more mature audience and a much greater sophistication. In fact, there are many adults that struggle dealing with the content and the material of the Holocaust. So what we're talking about when we talk about the requirement of teaching kindergartners and children who are in elementary school, we're really talking about building a foundation of empathy and building a foundation of understanding that we have a responsibility for our neighbor. We have, so we like to call it the teaching of upstanding. We want our children to be upstanders, not bystanders. Um, we live in a time where it's very easy to simply turn another direction when we see something that we don't like or something not well, going on well or to our standards. And what we want our kindergarten teachers to understand and parents of elementary age and even middle schoolers, although by middle school, in some cases, those children are ready to start dealing with some of the material. But in elementary school, we really encourage the teachers and parents to engage their children in conversation, to be able to act when they see something happening that they don't agree with. We have an innate inclination to know right from wrong. We know when somebody is behaving in an inappropriate manner, and when we use the term bullying a lot. Having been in the classroom and having been an administrator in the school setting, I know that the word bullying is sort of thrown around a lot, and we try to stay away from using the concept of bullying in Holocaust education because bullying and the genocide that took place, they're not comparable. But we don't really have a language to be able to explain or express it, so we use bullying-like behaviors or language it of bullying-like behaviors. So what we want is we want children to be able to develop the skills and the understanding that they need to be upstanders. We want our children to act when they see something inappropriate. We want them to be actively engaged and proactive in behaving in a positive manner. And those are the kinds of things that we really want our kindergarten and our elementary school teachers. The teaching of tolerance is another great curriculum piece. The teaching of community, the sense of responsibility, all of those pieces are what we consider the baseline, the sort of the foundation of Holocaust education, because if children understand those things and if children are engaged in that content, by the time they reach middle school or high school, they're now able to better understand how things like that happened. Elie Wiesel used the quote that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And we, as Holocaust educators, we believe that much of how the Holocaust came to be is because there were too many people simply bystanding. There were too many people who simply had a sense of indifference to what was happening around them. And so what we really want is to educate all of our society. I mean, this is not unique to Holocaust education, but we want people to simply act and behave responsibly, to be good citizens, to be what we like to use the term upstanders.
Yeah, it makes so much sense what you're saying. But it wasn't until you explained it to me, and sent me the blog post that because I was researching what are commemorative weeks, what are topics that I want to make sure that the Turner Moms community knows about, and I was like, wow, I really want to make sure that everyone knows about Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, because that way you can ask your kids, did you talk about this at school, right? And or maybe in the future encourage teachers to set up a field trip so that students could go to the Holocaust Museum. And then at home at the dinner table, talk about, we talk about current events at the dinner table in my family, and there's been a lot to talk about lately. That's for sure. And and you can draw parallels between current events and what's happened in the past, and about how people should behave in public life. And I didn't feel as well equipped about how to have these conversations. And my kids are older now, so I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. But I, like you said, it's really important to start these things when the kids are younger, because otherwise, if they later just come across the astonishing numbers, right, or some of the photographs that are just so horrifying, right? Some of the testimonies about atrocities, it almost seems like somebody must have made it up, right? Like, how could this have really have happened? But it really did happen. I mean, there are American soldiers who liberated some of these camps, and they recorded their testimonies. They took photos, so we know it really happened. But somehow it's just hard to wrap our minds around. So it's like, how do we prepare young minds for that, and presenting it as like these atrocities happened when there's an absence of responsibility and sense of community, caring for your neighbors, right? When the upstanders don't stand up, that's when these atrocities can happen.
Yeah, while you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about General Eisenhower's comment when he was responsible for all the American troops, the Allied troops in Europe, and when the camps were liberated, he made a point of wanting and requiring the American soldiers to go and see with their own eyes what had happened, because he said that, he was a little bit prophetic. He said that people someday will not believe this. This is such a vast genocide that is inconceivable to the rational mind. And so when you have children that grow up with a basic understanding, or sort of we allow them to develop their frame of reference as the world around them, it's hard to imagine the slaughter of 6 million Jews, of 1.5 million children. These are numbers that are inconceivable. And so Eisenhower made a point of saying we have to have eyewitnesses to this, because someday people will deny that this actually occurred. And we're seeing those times today. We're seeing those individuals. In some cases, they're what we consider educated adults. These are not necessarily ignorant, uneducated people. These are simply people who cannot fathom those kinds of numbers, and so they reject it without studying it or validating their knowledge.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I'm as like I feel like as I have a platform with the San Antonio Charter Moms community, that we can talk about this, and we can try to prepare the next generation, right? And we can, and I even as I've talked about this with members of our team or members of our group, they said, oh yeah, my kid came home with a worksheet, like in the newsletter it said that this is what they're going to cover in history class next week, and they're like, I don't remember them covering that before, but it's like, oh yeah, well, it's only the second year of this week, but but I'm seeing evidence of it out in the community. It's showing up in history curriculums. There's there even before the pandemic, at my kids' school, they had a Holocaust survivor come and speak on campus, and it made an impression on the kids. And that's and like in some ways it seems like it was so long ago, and yet there are still survivors, or like next generation descendants of survivors who are part of the San Antonio community. And like you said, the four ladies in the car who drove back and forth to Austin to make sure that this was on the books, and that that these stories would carry on, so that we can make sure this.
we are super proud in San Antonio at the museum in particular, because last year was our first opportunity to promote Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, and there were obviously a number of local educators, and we service the South Texas community. So we service the educational community beyond San Antonio, and we had about 400 participants, join us for the presentations that we did in last year's Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week. And this year, through a generous grant from the Texas Holocaust Genocide Commission, which is a commission of the Texas legislature, we were able to expand our presentations, and we were hoping to be able to reach 800 participants. But as of this morning, I don't even know what it is now, but as of this morning, we had over 1,000 registered participants, and we only expect to see that grow tremendously next week when we add in the actual presentations. We're offering 2 a day live, and then 1 recorded Virtually everything's accessible, and I encourage anybody who's watching to go to the blog post. There's links in there, and you've shared the museum link. These are all presentations that are directly related to the Holocaust. They're on different subject matter. You did mention Holocaust survivors, and the reality is that many of our Holocaust survivors are simply they're of age now where if they're still alive, it's hard for them to speak to groups for extended periods of time. We have a very small contingent of Holocaust survivors left in San Antonio, and we care about them deeply. We would love for them to speak to every possible group they can. We know that the research shows that listening to a Holocaust survivor, there is no educational experience that can equal listening to a Holocaust survivor themselves. And so we have recorded our survivors. We have recordings on the website, but as you know, it's not the same thing. And the power and impact of our Holocaust survivors when they share their story in person is, nothing can compare to that. So.
Yeah, but that means the mission of the Holocaust Memorial Museum is especially important because that's how the story carries forward, to future generations. As it's to preserve those memories and make sure that the story keeps getting told, and like you said, translating it into age appropriate curriculum to support what the educators are doing, so they can. Right, like you said, so for like kindergarten or elementary school grades, they can teach lessons about tolerance. They can talk about being an upstander. They can talk about how to act with kindness towards the kids around you. If you see, like, listening to your own sense of right and wrong, and if you see something that is wrong, don't just turn the other way, but do something about it. Talk to an adult, speak up, and make sure that the right outcome happens.
Yeah. I all of those things are key, and we can't overstate the importance of those lessons. The other thing is that in some cases, teachers aren't necessarily prepared in educational programs to address those kinds of things. We live in a very assessing world, and it's hard to assess those soft skills of our children. And so teachers are overwhelmed with the burden of having to teach the facts and the details and the things that get tested. And if we don't shift, or at least have an eye on the soft skills that our children are learning, that our children need to learn, then we're doing an injustice to our society. In our Jewish tradition, we differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing the information, and wisdom is knowing what to do with it. And so we really emphasize the fact that knowing simply isn't enough. What do you do once you have that knowledge is really what differentiates the people who help move the world forward and those who create strife.
Yeah. Well, that's where, I mean, what I hope to accomplish through the blog post and through interviewing you, and I hope, and we can revisit this every year on Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, is to just keep use the platform that I have. Parents know that we're a resource to find enrichment information, and as difficult a subject as this is, it's essential that every family and every school talk about this, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. That you can just focus on these essential lessons, and the broader purpose of things like the Texas Holocaust Genocide Commission, and is to spread awareness so that these atrocities don't happen again. But like you said, understanding about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, that's something that benefits students even while they're in school, and it benefits us as adults in life, like having a better workplace environment, right, where everyone's treated with respect and there's inclusion and tolerance and diversity in the workplace. and in schools, making sure, right, like I have a child with special needs, and I sought out an environment where I knew he would be included, and that was really important to me. That these are broader values, beyond just teaching about the Holocaust, but that it can make our society better. We can learn from these historical events to make the world better now.
Absolutely. First of all, let me say it would be my pleasure to come back every year to be able to do this. I think the important thing for us is to let everybody know that although Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week is 1 week out of the year, the museum is accessible year-round. We don't like to say that the museum is closed, because the museum is virtually open 24/7, 365. What we really want is, we were completely in awe. I was sharing some numbers earlier, but we have had over 200,000 touches on our museum Facebook page this month alone. That is an incredible number, and it means, it's a testament that teachers and parents out there are starting to sort of find greater interest in Holocaust education. But what we would like to see is, we would love to be able to see teachers maybe not wait until this 1 week a year to educate the children on this. Maybe this could be the, visit to the museum might be the start of a curriculum on how to treat each other. Or maybe it becomes, Texas Holocaust Week becomes the end of a year-long program. So we just encourage our parents out there, our educators out there, our community leaders, to think about the fact that although it's 1 week that is mandated by the state legislature, that there is plenty that this curriculum can stimulate, and that will help teachers in the classroom, or parents engage in conversation with their children at home about these really important topics.
Yeah. Well, that's a good lead into. I want to remind everyone that in the description of the video, there's a link to the blog post, and that reinforces the message about why teaching kids to be upstanders is an age-appropriate way to observe Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week, and give kids that foundation, so that as they get older, they can grapple with the facts and the historical knowledge about the atrocities, and leading towards adults who are upstanders and treat each other with respect, care about how their neighbors are doing, and be responsible members of the community, because those are universal values, and will make the world a better place. So please read the blog post, share this, and then like you said, that on the website of the Holocaust Memorial Museum in San Antonio, there's they can sign up for events. So if you could kind of recap, like what's coming up this coming week, and how they can get involved.
Sure. So we have 2 live presentations every day this week. Actually, one of our presentations is completely in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking audience. And then we have one presentation that will be uploaded, that will be pre-recorded, so that if teachers in the classroom, if their class hour doesn't coordinate with a live presentation, they can broadcast one of the pre-recorded presentations. The presentations are all listed on the website. They have different topics, so if you have the flexibility to be able to choose a different day and on which day to listen to a presentation, please look at the topics and see what makes sense to your audience. And separate from that, we have the resources for downloading additional resources. This week, I believe we've checked out every educational trunk and traveling exhibit that we have in the museum. But if teachers are interested in checking out a traveling exhibit, which are some really high quality exhibits that they can open up in their classroom and engage students with, or a traveling educational trunk that has a class set of books for teachers to use with their students, as well as other curriculum materials. This week is usually they're checked out pretty quickly, but they're available year round. And you know, and then also I should add that we do a number of workshops for educators year round. So for those teachers who may be looking for a way to be able to find greater opportunities to struggle with the curriculum or find educational ways to teach this material, because it really is difficult subject matter. You know, we don't assume that it's just like any other historical content. This has emotional and serious emotional ties that can, you know, that could be that could come out of this. So anyway, the museum website is absolutely the best place to go. We would love to, when we open up the doors to the museum again, see you come, whether as a family or as a classroom. And thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and it's just a reminder everyone, Texas Holocaust Remembrance Week is it's coming up next week. That's January 25th through 29th, 2021. And this is the second annual, but it will come back, you know, year after year. But like you said, the exhibits virtually are open 24/7. The museum is open year round, and you know, so it's always there as a resource, you know, for teachers or families who want to, you know, introduce this idea of being an upstander to their students. Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to coming to the museum when the physical location opens again. In the meantime, we'll be on the website.
Thanks so much.
All right, thanks. Bye.